Picture this. It's New Year's Eve. Everyone around you is celebrating fresh starts, new beginnings, resolutions for a better year. But you're carrying the same weight you've carried for years. The same toxic relationship, the same draining dynamic, the same person who takes and never gives back. And you're standing at a crossroads because this year you have a choice, and that choice changes everything. You've been told that being an empath means being understanding, forgiving, patient, that you're supposed to give people chances, that cutting someone off is cruel, that holding boundaries makes you the bad person. And maybe you've believed that. Maybe you've spent years absorbing someone else's dysfunction because you thought that's what empathy required. But that belief has kept you trapped. Because real empathy includes empathy for yourself. And sometimes the most empathic thing you can do is walk away. This is the New Year Ultimatum. One decision, one boundary, one moment where you finally say enough. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of clarity, out of self-preservation, out of the understanding that some relationships aren't meant to be healed, they're meant to be ended. And the power of that decision isn't just that it removes the toxic person from your life, it's that it removes years of conditioning that told you their presence was your responsibility. Most people think ultimatums are aggressive, manipulative, a power play, but that's because they've seen ultimatums used wrong. A real ultimatum isn't about controlling someone else, it's about defining what you will and won't accept in your own life. It's not change or I leave, it's this behavior is no longer tolerable and I'm choosing my peace regardless of what you do. And that shift from trying to control their behavior to simply protecting your boundaries is what makes it powerful. Here's what happens when you've been in a toxic dynamic for years. Your brain adapts. It normalizes the dysfunction. It convinces you that this is just how relationships are, that everyone struggles like this, that if you just try harder, communicate better, love more patiently, things will change. But they won't. Because the problem isn't your effort. The problem is that you're trying to have a healthy relationship with someone who's incapable of reciprocating health. This is the adaptation trap. Your brain's ability to adapt to difficult circumstances is a survival mechanism. It helped your ancestors survive harsh conditions. But in a toxic relationship, that same mechanism becomes a prison. Because you adapt to mistreatment, you normalize manipulation, you adjust your expectations down and down and down until you're accepting behavior you never would have tolerated at the beginning. And you call that adaptation growth. But it's not growth, it's erosion. Sarah spent 5 years in a friendship that drained her. Every conversation was about her friend's problems. Every plan got canceled when her friend found something better. Every boundary Sarah tried to set got guilt-tripped into oblivion. And Sarah kept showing up because she thought that's what good friends do, that loyalty means staying even when it hurts, that walking away would make her the shallow one. Until New Year's Eve, Sarah was sitting alone because her friend canceled their plans last minute again. And Sarah had a thought that changed everything. What am I getting from this? Not what this could become, not what it used to be. What is this relationship actually giving me right now? And the answer was nothing. Stress, disappointment, the feeling of being an option rather than a priority. And Sarah realized, I've been afraid to lose something I don't actually have. This is the reality audit. You stop evaluating the relationship based on potential or history. You evaluate it based on present reality. What is this person actually contributing to your life right now? Not who they could be if they changed, not who they were 3 years ago, who they are today, what they're doing today, how they're treating you today. And when you audit from that place of brutal honesty, the answer becomes clear. Sarah made her decision that night. She didn't wait for the next incident, didn't give one more chance, didn't explain or justify. She sent one message: I need to step back from this friendship. I wish you well. And then she blocked the number. Not out of cruelty, out of self-protection.
because she knew if she left the door open, she'd get pulled back in. And the pull wouldn't be because the friendship was good, it would be because her brain was addicted to the pattern.
Here's what most people don't understand about toxic relationships. They're not just emotionally draining, they're biochemically addictive. Your brain gets used to the cycle. The stress, the relief, the hope, the disappointment. It becomes a pattern your nervous system expects. And breaking that pattern feels wrong, even when the relationship is destroying you, because your brain interprets the unfamiliarity of peace as danger. This is the addiction loop. Toxic relationships create intermittent reinforcement. Sometimes the person is good, sometimes they're terrible, and that unpredictability creates a dopamine pattern that's harder to break than consistent negativity. Your brain starts craving the highs to compensate for the lows, and you mistake that craving for love, for connection, for something worth fighting for. But it's not love, it's addiction, and the only way to break an addiction is to remove access to the substance. When Sarah blocked her friend, she felt immediate relief, and then an hour later, panic. Her brain started bargaining. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I should have given her one more chance. Maybe I'm being too harsh. And Sarah almost unblocked the number, almost sent an apology, almost walked back the boundary. But she didn't, because she recognized what was happening. Her brain was in withdrawal, and withdrawal feels like making a mistake, but it's not. It's healing. The first week was the hardest. Sarah kept reaching for her phone to text her friend, kept thinking of things she wanted to share, kept feeling guilty for cutting someone off, but she held the boundary. Not because it felt good, because she knew on the other side of the withdrawal was freedom. And by week 3, something shifted. The urge to reach out faded, the guilt loosened, and Sarah started noticing how much energy she had now that she wasn't managing someone else's chaos. This is the liberation timeline. The first days feel like loss. The first weeks feel like withdrawal. But the first months feel like waking up. You start remembering who you were before this relationship consumed you. You start having energy for things that matter. You start building connections with people who actually reciprocate. And you realize you weren't losing someone important. You were losing someone who was preventing you from finding what's actually important. But here's where most empaths struggle. The guilt. You've been conditioned to believe that walking away makes you the villain, that cutting someone off is cruel, that you're supposed to work through everything, and that conditioning keeps you tied to people who drain you because you're more afraid of being seen as cold than you are of being slowly destroyed by someone else's dysfunction. This is the empathy paradox. You extend empathy to everyone except yourself. You understand why they behave the way they do. You make excuses for their patterns. You give them grace for their struggles. But you don't extend the same understanding to your own need for peace. And that imbalance is what keeps you trapped. Marcus dealt with this for years with his brother. His brother was chaos, financial disasters, relationship drama, always needing something. And Marcus always helped, because that's what family does. Because his brother had a hard childhood, because Marcus felt guilty for having his life together when his brother didn't. So Marcus kept absorbing the chaos, kept bailing his brother out, kept sacrificing his own peace for someone who never changed. Until this new year, Marcus got a call from his brother. Another crisis, another demand for money, and Marcus said something he'd never said before. No, not "I can't right now," not "let me think about it," just "no, I'm done." His brother was shocked, then angry, then manipulative. "I'm your brother. How can you turn your back on family?" And Marcus felt the familiar guilt rising, but this time he didn't cave. Because Marcus had finally understood something crucial. Helping someone who refuses to help themselves isn't compassion, it's enabling, and enabling doesn't heal anyone. It keeps them dependent, it keeps you drained, and it prevents both of you from growing. Marcus wasn't abandoning his brother, he was refusing to participate in a dynamic that harmed them both.
This is the enabling trap. You think you're being supportive, but you're actually preventing the other person from facing the consequences of their choices. And without consequences, there's no reason to change. Your help becomes the cushion that makes their dysfunction comfortable. And the more you help, the less they grow. Not because they're bad people, but because you've removed the pressure that forces transformation. Marcus's brother escalated. Threats, guilt trips, manipulation through other family members. And Marcus held firm. He didn't argue, didn't defend his decision, didn't try to make his brother understand. He just repeated the boundary. I'm not doing this anymore. I wish you well. And eventually, his brother stopped trying, not because he accepted the boundary, but because he found easier targets. And that realization hurt, because Marcus had always told himself his brother needed him, that Marcus was the only one who understood, the only one who cared enough to help. But the truth was simpler and sadder. His brother didn't need Marcus specifically. He needed supply. And once Marcus stopped being supply, his brother moved on without a second thought, which proved Marcus had been right to walk away. Here's the pattern empaths need to understand. Toxic people don't value your empathy. They exploit it. They're not staying in your life because they love you. They're staying because you're useful, because you give them something they can't get elsewhere. And the second you stop giving, they reveal how little you actually meant to them. And that revelation, painful as it is the proof you needed that walking away was the right choice. This is the supply revelation. You were never a person to them. You were a resource. And once you see that clearly, the guilt evaporates, because you're not abandoning someone who cares about you. You're removing yourself from someone who was using you, and there's no moral obligation to continue being used. The New Year Ultimatum isn't just about one decision with one person. It's about rewiring your entire relationship with boundaries. It's about recognizing that you've been conditioned to see boundary setting as aggression when it's actually self-care, that you've been taught to prioritize other people's comfort over your own well-being, and that pattern needs to end. This is the boundary revolution. Every time you've let someone cross a boundary to avoid conflict, you've taught them your boundaries don't matter. Every time you've stayed in a dynamic that drained you to prove you're a good person, you've proven to yourself that your peace is negotiable. And that pattern doesn't change with better communication. It changes with decisive action. Jennifer had been in a romantic relationship for 3 years that should have ended after 6 months. Red flags everywhere, emotional manipulation, gaslighting, disrespect disguised as jokes. But Jennifer kept trying, kept believing he'd change, kept thinking she could love him into being better. And every time she considered leaving, he'd improve just enough to make her stay. This new year, Jennifer made a decision. She was leaving. Not after one more conversation, not after he promised to change again. She was leaving today. And she did. Packed her things while he was at work, left a note, blocked his number, changed her locks, and didn't look back. Because she knew if she gave him the chance to talk, she'd stay. And staying meant sacrificing more years to a relationship that was never going to become what she needed. Her friends asked why she didn't try couples therapy, why she didn't give him one more chance to change. And Jennifer's answer was simple: because I've given him 100 chances already, and I finally realized I was waiting for him to choose me, but he's been showing me his choice for 3 years. I was just refusing to see it.
This is the choice recognition. You've been interpreting their behavior as confusion or struggle, thinking they don't realize how they're treating you, but they do. Their behavior is their choice, and their choice has been clear. You're just finally willing to see it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that clarity makes the decision inevitable. The ultimatum isn't about making them change. It's about accepting they won't and choosing yourself anyway. It's about recognizing that you've been negotiating with someone who has no intention of meeting you halfway, and you're done negotiating. You're choosing differently. And that choice doesn't require their approval or understanding. It just requires your commitment. Here's what happens after you make the decision: immediate relief, then doubt, then withdrawal symptoms, then people questioning your choice, family saying you're being too harsh, friends saying maybe you should give it more time, and the pressure to go back is immense because everyone around you has been conditioned by the same beliefs that kept you trapped, that empaths should endure, that walking away is failure, that love means staying no matter what. But you're not failing. You're succeeding at something they haven't learned yet, self-preservation. You're prioritizing your peace over other people's opinions. You're choosing your future over your past. And that strength looks like coldness to people who've never had to make that choice. But their judgment is irrelevant because they're not living your life. They're not carrying your weight, and they don't get a vote in your liberation. This is the judgment shield. Other people's opinions about your boundaries say more about their boundaries than yours. People who criticize you for walking away are usually people who are too afraid to walk away from their own toxic dynamics, and their criticism is projection. They're not upset that you're being too harsh. They're upset that you're doing what they wish they had the courage to do. 3 months after Sarah cut off her toxic friend, she ran into her at a coffee shop. Her friend tried to start a conversation, acted like nothing had happened, like Sarah's boundary didn't matter. And Sarah felt the old pull, the urge to be polite, to engage, to give her friend what she wanted, because that's what nice people do. But Sarah didn't. She said calmly, "I meant what I said. I need you to respect my decision." And she walked away. Her friend looked shocked, hurt, like Sarah was the villain in this story. And for a moment, Sarah almost apologized, almost explained herself, but she didn't. Because she'd learned something crucial. You don't owe toxic people closure. You don't owe them understanding. You don't owe them a detailed explanation of why their behavior was unacceptable. You just owe yourself the commitment to hold your boundary even when it's uncomfortable. This is closure independence. You've been waiting for them to understand, to acknowledge what they did, to validate your decision to walk away. But that validation will never come, because people who violate boundaries don't respect them, and expecting them to suddenly understand why you left is like expecting someone who's been hitting you to apologize for your bruises. They won't, because if they had that level of awareness, they wouldn't have hurt you in the first place.
The ultimatum is your closure, not their apology, not their growth, not their eventual realization that they were wrong. Your decision to walk away is the period at the end of the sentence, and you don't need them to agree with it for it to be final. You just need to hold it. Even when they push, even when they guilt, even when they act confused about why you're being so dramatic, your boundary is yours, and it's not up for debate. 6 months later, Marcus's brother reached out, not to apologize, to ask for money. Like the boundary had never existed, like Marcus's decision meant nothing, and Marcus deleted the message without responding because he'd learned something important. Toxic people test boundaries forever. They'll wait months or years for you to soften, and the second you do, they'll flood back in like nothing changed. So you don't soften, you hold, not out of bitterness, out of commitment to the life you're building without them. This is boundary permanence. The decision isn't just for today, it's forever, until you consciously choose otherwise. And toxic people will test that. They'll wait for moments of weakness, holidays, birthdays, crises. They'll show up when you're vulnerable and try to slip back in. And if you let them, you'll be right back where you started. So you don't let them. You hold the line. Because every time you reinforce the boundary, it gets stronger. And every time you cave, you teach them boundaries are negotiable. 1 year after Jennifer left her relationship, her ex called her from a new number, said he'd changed, that he realized everything now, that he was sorry and wanted another chance. And Jennifer felt nothing, not anger, not longing, just a mild awareness that he was still running the same patterns, still saying what he thought she wanted to hear, still trying to manipulate his way back in. And Jennifer said,
I'm glad you're working on yourself, but I've moved on. Please don't contact me again." And she meant it, because Jennifer had spent that year building a life she didn't need to escape from, dating people who treated her well, building friendships that felt reciprocal, learning to recognize red flags early and walk away without guilt. And she realized she'd spent 3 years trying to make a broken relationship work when she could have been building a healthy one. And that realization made the year of freedom worth more than the 3 years of struggle ever were. This is the opportunity cost. Every year you spend in a toxic dynamic is a year you're not spending building something healthy. Every ounce of energy you pour into someone who drains you is energy you're not investing in yourself or people who actually value you. And you can't see the cost while you're in it. You only see it after you leave. And that's when you realize the relationship wasn't just bad, it was expensive, and you finally stopped paying. The New Year Ultimatum is powerful because it uses the cultural reset as momentum. Everyone's making changes, everyone's talking about fresh starts, and you are not just talking, you're acting. You're making the one decision that changes the trajectory of your entire year. And that decision isn't about them, it's about you. About reclaiming the energy you've been giving away, about building a life where your boundaries aren't constantly negotiated. Here's what the ultimatum looks like in practice. You decide. You communicate it once, clearly and calmly. You don't defend it. You don't explain it beyond the basics. And then you enforce it completely. No exceptions, no weak moments, no just this once. Because every exception teaches them the boundary is flexible, and flexible boundaries aren't boundaries, they're suggestions. And when you hold it, when you make it through the first hard weeks, the guilt, the pushback, the moments where you almost cave, something shifts. You stop feeling like you're being mean. You start feeling like you're being sane. You stop worrying about their feelings. You start prioritizing your peace. And you realize this is what healthy boundaries feel like. Uncomfortable at first, liberating after. The people who are meant to be in your life will respect your boundaries. They won't push, won't guilt, won't make you feel bad for having standards. And the people who fight your boundaries, they're showing you exactly why the boundary was necessary. Their resistance is confirmation. And every time they prove they don't respect your limits, they prove you were right to set them. So this new year, make the decision. Not tomorrow, not after one more conversation. Today, right now. Choose yourself. Choose your peace. Choose the life you want instead of the dysfunction you've been tolerating. Make the ultimatum. Hold the boundary. Walk away from what's draining you and toward what's healing you. Because you've given enough years to people who didn't value them. And the most powerful thing you'll ever do is finally decide you're worth more than what you've been accepting.